It is the case, though. I mean, because the first thing you have to understand about the 8 verses training the mind, it's training the mind. Well, how would it be training the mind? I was listening to a Tibetan teacher teach the 8 verses, and he was talking about bodhisattvas. He said one way to talk about the 8 verses of training the mind is to say a bodhisattva is somebody who's awake enough to have compassion and deep understanding of the innocence of other human beings who are lost in the identity of being a person. A bodhisattva is somebody who understands that. And so because the bodhisattva understands that, the bodhisattva has compassion for them, right? Because the bodhisattva knows they will generate more suffering for themselves. They do not know what they're doing. One of the stories he told, this particular Tibetan teacher told, is a favorite story of the Dalai Lama about compassion that's related to the 8 verses of training the mind. He said that one of the monks who had been in prison in China for 17 years finally got released, and he was a friend of he knew the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama said it must have been a pretty difficult time. What were the challenges of existing for 17 years in a Chinese prison and being tortured? And he said, well, I almost lost it. And so the Dalai Lama said, oh, well, it's understandable given those conditions and everything. And he said, no, what I mean to say when I say that is I almost lost it. In all the time that I was being abused and tortured, I came very close to not having compassion for my torturers. Right? That was his losing it, right? That he came very close to not appreciating the fact that these people who were torturing him were innocent, that they didn't understand that what they were doing doesn't work and that they will have to suffer for what they're doing. They don't understand that. So why be angry with them? It goes right back to this. I mentioned earlier that I started reading this book by Robert Sapolsky, who was a famous scientist, neuroscientist, biologist, etc., highly regarded. He's written a lot of books on human behavior. And this book just came out. It's called Determined Life Without Free Will. Right? And you could ask, what because one of the things that occurred to me is, why is he writing this book? Right? He says right in the beginning of the book that this is not a question that he has. He's convinced, absolutely convinced, that there's no free will, and he's really looked at it hard as a scientist, as a human being, from a spiritual perspective, the whole 9 yards. Well, the reason he wrote this book is because he thinks the subject is so relevant and so important in understanding life and understanding who you are and understanding how things work, so that you can get the benefit of seeing things as they actually are. I say that here, get the benefit of seeing things as they actually are. And so in this book, he's saying that he starts out, he talks about the Benjamin Leibniz research that was done many, many years ago that proved very clearly, scientifically, through research, that when a person chooses to do something, that when they become aware of the choice to do it, their brain is already in action to do it before they're aware that they're making the choice. This is a famous thing that Leibniz came up with, and since that time there's been a lot of follow-up research on that experiment by some people to disprove it, by other people to prove it. And so in this book he talks about a lot of that stuff and says that in every case it proved it, that it was true, scientifically proved it. And then he goes on in this book to talk about all the yaysayers and naysayers and kind of explaining why people won't let go of the idea of there being free will and so forth and so on. But in the end, as he says in the very beginning of the book, his purpose of writing the book is, if you read this book, his intention is when you're done reading this book, you're convinced. You're convinced enough to start to observe how things are actually happening, instead of just continuing to operate with the assumption and the belief that there's free will and you're a free agent and you can do things. And the reason that that's important is because it changes your life. That's why it's important, just like practicing meditation. It changes your life to see that it is actually the case that no one can hurt you. No one is, there is no such thing as evil behavior. You've never done anything that you should feel guilt or shame about because you had no choice. Nobody else has the choice either. So everybody's innocent. Everybody's innocent. That doesn't mean that we don't have to deal with human behavior. Right? It means that we can deal more effectively with human behavior because we're not being overrun by our moral reaction to the whole thing, right? That I have to get retribution, I have to get payback. Look at what's going on in the world right now. I have to get payback. I can't look at this thing from seeing it from the way things really are, because my core beliefs are that human beings are intentionally behaving. They're doing things that they choose to do. They have a choice about it. They have free will. If that's not true, that changes the way we deal with human behavior, because what it means is we still have to deal with the behavior, but without the moral implication, without saying that a person's a bad, nasty, evil person. No, we're just saying the behavior that that person is manifesting is dangerous and unacceptable. So we deal with the behavior, right? But we don't cripple the person's ability to function by saying that they're the source of that behavior, and therefore we're going to torture them, we're going to punish them, we're going to make them sorry they ever did that, with the idea that that's going to change the way they behave. That's the epitome of stupidity. Look at the criminal justice system. We have more people in prison in this country than any other country in the world, right? We have the highest return rate to prison than any country in the world, right? And nothing goes on in the prison that makes any difference. We're just feeding them and torturing them. And I've been in the prison system. I know the prison system intimately. I understand the politics of it and everything, and I can tell you the prisons are, it's a warehousing of human beings. No, it's no different than the SPCA. Seriously, it's no different. No, SPCA is probably better. People treat dogs in the SPCA better than guards treat prisoners in the prison. And then we expect those prisoners to come out and like change their ways. And of course they don't, right? And then we say, okay, it's your fault again, you go back in prison again, right? And who's paying the bill? That's your tax money. Our tax money is paying for an unjust justice system and an out-of-control nuclear stockpile. That's what you're paying more money than for. Your taxes go to that than more than anything else that it's being spent on. So what does it come back down to? Well, it all comes back down to the individual mistaken perception of reality. It all comes back down to the individual misunderstanding about who they are. And when that gets dealt with, when that gets seen through the practice of meditation and through studying the teachings that go all the way back to the Buddha saying, deeds are done, actions occur, but there's no doer therein. The Buddha said that. He was saying there's no free will, right, 2,500 years ago. And the people that said it 2,500 years ago, and even in the Bible, thy will be done, right? The people who saw that 2,500 years ago, they were seeing it as just, they were free enough from their orientation as a personality and as a physical body. They were free enough from that through the practice of meditation and through the teachings that go along with that to be able to see clearly what the hell's going on instead of just what you think about it or how you feel about it. And that's what this is all about. If your life is a function of how you feel and what you think, right, your life can't work. It cannot work. That cannot work. Because you're not designed to be happy, you're designed to survive. And which means if you're designed to survive, it means that anything that gets in your way, anything that threatens you, right, you have to do what the brain tells you to do, which is either you fight or freeze, fight, or run. You have no choice about it. You have no choice about it. Your nervous system will take over. And what these teachings are telling us, is, especially when it comes to the things like determinism and free will, is that that's what's going on 100%. That's what's going on 100%. The thing that people have to understand that will kind of make it easier for you to deal with the topic, right, is that it doesn't change anything. It doesn't mean that you can't contemplate the future. It doesn't mean that you can't actively work on changing behaviors. It doesn't mean you can't actively work on establishing meditation practice. If that was the case, why would we be here? Why would we be here?
But you're saying in the end it won't make a difference because we have no choice.
It won't make a difference unless it does. See, because what I'm saying here is that nothing changes, and what I mean by that is that the part of it that the mind resists and the part of it the personality resists without examining it, if you examined it, you would realize that it's not as bad as you think it is, right? The part that you don't examine and you don't see is that what's predetermined is the idea that you believe you have free will. That's predetermined. You have no free will about the belief that you have free will. And it doesn't change anything. If you take your personality out of the picture, right, and you say, I am that, like Nisargadatta did, I am that, right, then you're saying that I am the cause and effect reality that's occurring. I am what's happening, right? Instead of thinking I'm separate from that, and therefore, because I'm separate from that, I'm a free agent, that I can do things, I can change things. No. If you kill the mistake, which is that you're a person and a personality, right? It's not that the idea of being a person doesn't continue in terms of the thought activity and so forth. You just see it for what it really is all. You don't consider it to be actual, you consider it to be a process. That's a huge change. It's a huge wake-up call to consider it to be a process instead of an actuality. And as soon as you deal with that effectively and you stop living your life as if it's true that you're a person and you're a separate self, as soon as you start doing that, you start seeing how you are what's happening. If there is nobody that it's happening to, you are what's happening. You are the cause and effect relationship occurring. You are that. You are what's happening. You are the cause.
Also, aren't we the witness?
Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of it.
So we are what's happening, and we're the witness of what's happening.
Yeah, and the witness of what's happening is part of what's happening, or not. Because you may not be the witness. You may be in the identity of a personality living that out, right? So when you look at these things the way I'm talking about it, it's interesting in a way, really, because what's been predetermined is that you're sitting here right now listening to me, isn't it? If this is true, isn't that true, right? But so it's predetermined that you're sitting here listening to me, but it's also predetermined that how your brain processes what you're hearing me say and the difference it makes in terms of whether you practice meditation or not, right? That's all predetermined, but the predetermination of it, right, can go either way. The way reality is occurring, right, is predetermined, but part of what's predetermined is that it can go either way at times. That's predetermined. So you sit here now, right, and whether you actually continue to meditate for the rest of your life or not, right, is predetermined, but it's not predetermined in terms of the thoughts you're having at this particular moment could go in either direction, right? So the good news is you're here, right? So it means you have the opportunity to be exposed to the possibility, right, of meditation and what it can do. But whether you take hold of that opportunity and understand it and realize the implications of it sufficiently that you are excited about it, that you're motivated to do it, that you want to do it, which is what it's going to take to do it. Because if you're not excited about it, motivated, and want to do it, your brain will take over and stop the process, right? Because it doesn't support your survival. And your brain doesn't care about anything but that. That's one of the things that I try and bring out here, the importance of getting clear about what this is, what the implications of this is. And I say it very clearly when I say your life depends on it. If you don't wake up, if you don't realize the possibility of your true nature, of being what you actually are, your life is going to go a different way, and it's not going to be fun, and it's not going to be pretty. Well, it's not even that hard. When you do anything, before you do it, you think to do it, right? Where do those thoughts come from? They come from your conditioning and your DNA, right? So if that's where the thoughts come from, they're not spontaneous. You're not making them up at the time. They're dependent. In Buddhism, they call it dependent origination. The origination of everything is dependent on what happened before it. It's a part of the teaching of Buddhism, dependent origination. Right? Why? So they talk about these teachings and practices. Why? Because if you understand these teachings and you do the practices, you can come out of the dark. You can start to experience what your life would be like, and it would be radically different. You could start to experience what your life would actually be like if you could see the innocence of you and the innocence of all of humanity. That's what Jesus is supposed to have meant when he said, if your sins are as many as all the grains of sand on all the beaches in the world, I forgive you, without even knowing what they are. You could be Hitler, I forgive you, immediately forgive you, right? How could that be so? It could be so because he understood that you were innocent to begin with. That's why I forgave you. You couldn't do anything wrong, so how could I hold you accountable for that? That's what he was trying to say. And in the Course of Miracles, if you study the Course of Miracles, that's exactly what they're getting at. They're getting at the understanding of what forgiveness means. Forgiveness means to give back to yourself your true nature. Forgive. Go back and give yourself back your true nature, your innocence. Allow yourself to realize and experience that your life is a blessing and a gift for you to enjoy, not to suffer. But the suffering will be inevitable if you make the cardinal mistake of thinking you're something you're not and thinking reality is something that it's not. And you're living in a world that is a dream world. It's a thought world. And it's a world of suffering, and it's a world of upset, and it's a world of resistance, and it's a world of coping and trying to get through it all, which is the survival process. So this is not, and the reason he wrote this book is because he's trying to say through the book to people, this is important. You know, don't just write it off because everybody believes in free will. Take the time and study it. You know, you take the time and use my intelligence and my wisdom and my experience to try and show you that there is no way it can be true that there's free will. And if you accept that and you're absolutely convinced of it, right, can you take the next step and start to look at how what that would imply in your life? What would it mean in terms of your relationship with your parents if they never did anything to you? What it would mean in your relationship with your children if they couldn't do anything wrong? What would it mean in relationship to your spouse if your spouse could never do anything to you? It's a whole different view. It's a whole different way of looking at it. It's a whole different understanding of it. And by the way, as far as I'm concerned, if you pursue that understanding of it and you start to allow yourself to see the difference it makes, you start to discover the possibility of love. Right? Because unconditional love is easy when you see things as they are. It's difficult when you're stuck in confusion and you're living your life as a separate self and you're looking at things from a conditioned view. Unconditional love is very hard under those conditions. But when you see things as they are, unconditional love is a natural expression of what you are. It's a natural expression. You don't have to do anything about it. You can't help but experience an affinity with everything that exists because you and that are the same thing. It's as simple as that. Those are just words, right? But those words won't make a difference. You have to do the practices that will get your brain hacked and get your brain freed enough from the conditioned reality so that you can start to enjoy yourself. That's what it's all about.